The UK has just launched a new initiative for parents about how their kids play video games. The idea is to inform parents about the games their children are playing and the controls that they can put in place. But is this really enough? And does it just absolve all those big bad companies of any and all responsibility? Here to discuss it with me is actual parent, Mr. Gareth Evans.
Hey.
I'm not. I'm staying well away from that garbage.
Put that thing back where it came from, or so help me!
So who are we talking about? This is the UKIE, or UKIE, or the Association of UK Interactive Entertainment. Apparently they forgot where the A should go, so they just abandoned it. So on their website, they describe themselves as a non-profit and represent businesses of all sizes, from small startups to large multinational developers, publishers and service companies working across online, mobile apps, consoles, PC, esports, VR and AR. They're a big UK-based trade association who specialise in gaming stuff, but we'll get on to some of the more questionable parts of their business in a short while. And another person right at the front of this is Rio Ferdinand, who I'm sure many of you are aware of, is a very, very successful English footballer, but he's also he's a single dad and he's a gamer too. He's just a guy. He's a normal guy like you and
he's
me.
fronting this campaign. He's on the commercials, and if Rio Ferdinand says that this info's legit, we've got to trust him, right?
Exactly. Now, I do think it's quite a good idea getting him, but I'll elaborate on that in just a bit. So what is it exactly? So it's a website called Ask About Games, which has just kind of been set up, and there's specifically a new scheme or initiative or program, whatever you want to call it, set up called Get Smart About Play, and it's got a lovely little acronym. I can't remember the name of it. It's a poem type thing, where it's made up of the letters of the word. So P is for play with your kids. Discover amazing games and understand what they play and why. L is for learn about family controls for your console. A is ask what your kids think. Discuss the ground rules before setting restrictions. And Y, you're in charge. Set restrictions that work for your family. Some corporate marketing person's very chuffed with themselves right now because they just scribbled that down on a notepad. It's like, I can make this work.
Like there's any parent in the world going to remember that and actually use that.
So it's play, learn, ask, and your, right? So all this stuff is based on a couple different surveys with some statistics and stuff from companies like the NSPCC or the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children and YouGov. So why are they doing all this? Well, their aim is to encourage more parents and carers to use the tools that manage screen time and in-game purchases on video game consoles. Now, don't get too excited about that mention of in-game purchases because that content is very few and far between in what they've done, which is the big reason this is sort of a half measure for me.
Yeah, in itself, that aim is quite noble. Raising awareness for parents for the safety concerns of their kids while they're playing games is a good thing. Like parents should be more aware of what the kids are doing online, and promoting that is a good thing.
There are numerous potential problems with this, and the one that's right at the forefront is whether or not this absolves the big game companies, your Activisions and your EAs, whether it absolves them of any responsibility to change their ways when it comes to stuff like loot boxes and predatory monetization. There's an implication in this new scheme that it's the parents' responsibility to sort it out, not the company's responsibility, and that's certainly up for debate. And there's an article by a guy called Chris Way on WCCF Tech, and he's very cynical about the whole program and says it's just offloading all the responsibilities on parents rather than criticizing the companies themselves who are the ones actually doing it. Now, that's not necessarily the case, and just because the aim of this scheme is to inform parents doesn't necessarily mean that they're not telling these companies they're bearing no responsibility. But given who's behind it all, that makes it a bit more questionable. And it is still a very, very valid criticism because the scheme itself doesn't provide any information about some of the harmful things that these companies are doing in the name of profit, namely loot boxes and dodgy microtransactions, pay to win, all that kind of stuff we hate as gamers, but a lot of the non-gaming parents don't seem to be aware of. It doesn't provide any international context, things like the fact that loot boxes are illegal in places like Belgium, or the recent Immersive and Addictive Technologies report, which was published, I think, over summer, which was when the UK politicians came together in the UK Digital Culture, Media and Sport Committee, and their ultimate conclusion was that they advised the UK government to ban loot boxes. They briefly mention stuff like Ultimate Team, but don't actually go into much detail about what it is or the harm that can be done. And there's no no definitions of what Ultimate Team actually really means, because we know what the word loot box means, but your average parent probably doesn't. And then there's things like DLC. How many parents know what those letters even stand for? Again, we all do, because it's just in our basic language now. And one example I looked up is Overwatch. We're all massively familiar with Overwatch, and I think this is one of the worst examples of normalizing loot boxes, because it's just cosmetic only. That's the huge argument that everyone says about Overwatch, is it's just cosmetic only, it doesn't change anything. But the problem is the gambling association and the act of opening this surprise mechanic, as EA likes to call it. All they put for their description of Overwatch in regards to monetization is, while experience points are gained at the end of matches, leveling up is reward, not rewarded, reward, typo.
Oh my god, shut up!
With purely cosmetic items such as color changes and victory poses, which do not provide an in-game advantage. These cosmetic items can also be bought with in-game or real-world currency. So in there, you've got experience points, leveling up, and cosmetic items. A bunch of terms that parents aren't necessarily going to know what they mean. If you never touch video games, you're not a gamer at all. And a lot of it relies on PEGI, and in Europe, that is the major ratings board who handle everything. And Overwatch is given just a 12 because it's cartoony and it's not that violent. You beat each other up, but there's not really any major blood or anything like that. And PEGI have nothing about gambling mechanics in their descriptors right now, and they've been under a lot of criticism recently for that. And stuff like, as I said, loot boxes are banned in Belgium, so surely parents would want to know why a certain feature of a product they're giving their kid is banned in other countries. They're like, oh, it's banned there, why isn't it banned here? And again, then there's the cosmetic only versus pay to win debate, which we have all the time with idiots in the comment section, but again, it's something that parents just aren't really aware of.
Yeah, and that's the problem with this whole initiative, is that it doesn't shed enough light on any of that.
One thing I think it does a reasonable job of trying to do, but whether or not it actually succeeds is questionable, is demonizing games and gamers and stuff like that. Because anytime something comes out as criticizing games, a lot of mainstream media outlets end up running with it and saying that games are the bad guys, games cause these bad things. But this new approach seems to be trying to avoid it, at least. So UKIE CEO Dr. Jo Twist, who's right at the front of all this, she says, it's not about saying you must do this or this is dangerous. It's about saying, look, these controls are here, they have always been there, and they always improve. The information is there. The ways in which you can manage playtime together is a challenge for the 21st century, but these tools and this guidance is here to help you. Games are not going away, and neither is the internet anytime soon. So I like that. It's not saying your games are bad or anything like that. It's saying these things are in there and you need to be aware of it. And they have this analogy about you wouldn't give a child a bicycle without a helmet or stabilizers. And the writer of the WCCF article criticised that, but I think it's quite an accurate analogy.
I don't know if I agree on that one.
Why?
I think riding a bike is innately dangerous, so you need protective equipment, whereas playing a game is not innately dangerous. They create the games, they make what the dangers are in the games themselves.
Yeah, but they still are dangerous. With the loot boxes and stuff.
monetization, well, that's only because they put them in there, right?
Yeah, but they're still there. It doesn't matter whether they put them there.
Well, if they didn't put them there, they wouldn't need a helmet, right?
Yeah, but you could get a bicycle with 3 wheels, taking off the wheel.
Okay, we obviously disagree on this one, but let us know what you think down in the comments.
And another one which I kind of thought of, which I know a lot of parents will think, is that it's patronizing. Because they say lines like, but then ultimately it's important to remind yourself that you're in charge. You've got to set these controls and ground rules that work for you and your family. And now that will sound patronizing to people, because you'll be like, well, why? I'm the parent, I am in control. These kids, they go to bed when I tell them, they eat when I tell them. But there are some cases where parents just aren't in control. Fundamentally, they're not in control. And I always argue, well, if you can't control kids, you're not in charge of them, you shouldn't have them. But the fact is that there are a lot of people who do have kids and don't control them, and they need to learn this sort of stuff in able to make sure that they are in control. And then one of my favorite things is that companies like the ESA, the Entertainment Software Association, which is the big regulatory body in the US, and Ubisoft, one of the biggest practitioners of in-game monetization, they've retweeted the stuff about this. They're all promoting it, and that's because it's keeping them safe. They definitely seem to think that it can, we'll tell the parents it's their responsibility, so we can wash our hands of all this and not think it's a problem.
So the main problem for me about all this is that, this Get Smart About Play initiative, and the information, like whether we can trust the information that they're providing due to who they are, essentially. They do put a lot of emphasis on the PEGI system, informing the parents about the games that they're playing, and there's even an app that you can download, like a PEGI ratings app, that you can check on what age ratings and descriptors and what type of content is in the games that your kids are playing, essentially, which is pretty good for like raising awareness. But if all that information in there, you can't trust it as a parent, then what is the point of it? At the end of the day, you've discussed about how PEGI rating system is pretty flawed, and if you look on the website itself, under the age rating PEGI 3, you've got FIFA 20 and NBA 2K, right? Both of them have very aggressive loot box systems, or surprise mechanics as they like to call it. It raises a couple of questions for a kickoff. So when you dig deeper into websites, sometimes you get like a game covered in detail, and there's one I looked at, which is the Parent's Guide to FIFA, and it explains during the Ultimate Team, like this website explains to you what Ultimate Team is. If you don't know as a parent, this is the information. It says there is an incentive to spend additional money to open virtual packs of players that can improve your team. A little like collecting football stickers you may have done as a child, but here you then use the players in your team. It is important to understand that this additional cost is an optional extra and not an essential part of the game. The fact that they're emphasizing that it's important to understand that this is an optional extra, and it's just like football stickers. What they're doing there is essentially just justifying these predatory monetization schemes that they've implemented in this game, totally ignoring the potential harm that these mechanics are doing to their kids, and not teaching them at all about these literally gambling mechanics in the games. Yeah, and you touched on before as well, these things that they're comparing to sticker books as you were a kid, these are illegal in a lot of territories in the world, and the UK are currently investigating. You've touched on that too, and that's all I've got to say. Oh, remember that this is only optional, and it's just like stickers, so it's fine. Like how can we trust this information? How we can trust these people when that's how they're describing these predatory monetization practices? And we've seen in the media how these types of things have harmed real life people. There was a story from June 2018 where a 32-year-old guy from the UK learned he spent $8,000 on FIFA Ultimate Team when he asked EA for his GDPR information, and he didn't know he'd spent so much, because obviously he's a 32-year-old guy. He's supposed to be in control of himself, and he spends $8,000 on that kind of stuff. There's another story from July last year when a couple of kids had spent £550 on Ultimate Team from their parents' bank account over a space of 3 weeks, and the parents didn't even know that they'd done it. If it was really impartial and neutral advice, which it isn't, this information would explain all of the dangers associated with these types of mechanics. Interestingly, the Ask About Games website is a joint venture between the VSC Rating Board and games trade body UKIE, which you touched on before, but the UKIE is not an independent organisation, so the information that it's providing on this website is not impartial, it's not independent. Obviously, it's a trade association set up by the game publishers themselves, and the board of directors from the UKIE, who was giving us this information, is made up from people like from Take-Two, Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, Warner Bros, Activision Blizzard, EA, Riot Games, ZeniMax, Bethesda, etc. All those people are the ones deciding what this information is going to be, and that's the whole problem with the initiative, you ask me. It informs parents about games and makes them think a bit more about how the kids are playing and whether they're being safe and what they're doing. But what they're doing here is they're quietly justifying or just overlooking the potentially harmful mechanics in the games, which parents should know about. Like they should know about this stuff, because we're talking about the average parent here who doesn't know shit about gambling mechanics, and just maybe gaming is just a hobby that they know nothing about, and the kids are spending a lot of time doing. And so that's one very big criticism of this initiative, and I think it's valid, the guy from WCCF Tech, but he didn't kind of make his argument really well. He puts this whole thing puts the responsibility of the safety of people's kids onto the parents or carers that accepts no responsibility whatsoever on behalf of the companies.
This was your responsibility!
Who are making a shit ton of money from these predatory forms of monetization, the people who are writing this advice.
It'd be so easy to just give the information, like people have spent excessive amounts of money on FIFA Ultimate Team and whatnot here, so put a link in your page so that when parents are reading through this information, it's like, oh, here's this and this, that sounds fine. Okay, what's this? This involves spending money. Okay, here's a guy who's run away and spent thousands without knowing. That sort of information isn't easily accessible to a lot of these people because they're not gamers. They don't really care.
Yeah.
But they care about the safety of their kids and their financial security, which is often at risk because these things are built to be so easy to just pay and pay and pay and pay.
And that's the problem, right? Is the people who called them surprise mechanics. That woman from EA sat there on the board saying it's just surprise mechanics. It's them people who are writing this advice for parents. It's them people who are saying, oh, it's just like collecting stickers when you were a kid. And that's the problem. That's the bottom line. If the games were safe in the first place, and it's kind of touching on my the analogy before that we were discussing with the bike and that, if they didn't have the predatory monetization things in the games in the first place, you wouldn't need a bike helmet, right? You wouldn't need to keep our kids safe while they're playing them because they'd be fine. But they create all of these safety issues that our kids face when they're playing games, and now they want us to be the ones responsible for our kids' safety. It's like they're asking us to wipe their arses after they've taken a shit on us. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, that is true, but until the games are safe, which isn't going to happen for a while, until these things are legally enforceable, it's better to have a helmet than no helmet at all while it is still
No, I
dangerous.
absolutely agree with that. I absolutely agree that there should be more education for parents, absolutely. But at the same time, I get what the guy from WCCF Tech was saying. He just didn't make his point correctly, that this whole thing it smells like shit because the whole thing is set up by people who make money out of microtransactions and predatory loot boxes.
I mean, the thing has only just started, so maybe it'll get better, but given the people who are behind it, I'm not so sure. But the person in front of it, Rio Ferdinand, I do think he's got quite a good catch because he's very easily recognizable. He's still a massive celebrity and, ex-athlete, but he's got a much more down-to-earth image than a lot of celebrities. Like, can you imagine if they got like a Kardashian or something to put at the front of it? And I think that'll at least get people's attention, like the parents of these kids, and maybe look into it a bit more and educate themselves. And the more they educate themselves, the more they become aware of the wider conversation around loot boxes through their own personal research, and then maybe we can actually get somewhere. But without the information immediately in front of them, it's just not going to go far enough, unfortunately. But anyway, that is just what we think about the latest development in the world addressing the epidemic of loot boxes that is slighting our gracious industry. Make sure to let us know down in the comments what you think. Do you think this is a good step? Do you think it's a bad step? Do you think it's just kind of in the middle and it's a way towards the right direction, but it's just simply not enough? Or do you just really not like Rio Ferdinand and you want to hit him in the face? Let us know, leave a like, hit subscribe, and of course the bell. I've been Henry, he's been Gaz. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.